Chapter 25. This grudge must be avenged. Shulang was awakened by the shrill ring of the phone. A hollow, ethereal sound seemed to drift out from the void itself, echoing unceasingly in his ears. His consciousness had yet to fully return. Half in a daze, he reached instinctively toward the phone by his side, following the persistent sound. Had he answered the call? He wasn't sure. Who was on the other end of the line? He had no idea. Everything before his eyes was pitch black. His mind, heavy and foggy, drifted between sleep and wakefulness. His eyelids felt as though they weighed 1,000 catties. It took several attempts before he finally managed to force them open, only the narrowest of slits. When the sunlight barged unceremoniously into his pupils, he heard a man's voice coming from the phone. "Hello." The reply slipped out of him instinctively, yet it startled Shulang himself. That hoarse voice, rasping as though it had been scraped raw with sandpaper for 3 days straight, had actually come from his own throat. As clarity slowly crept back into his head, a dull ache began to pound inside his skull. Shulang's body felt like a rusted, broken down machine, every movement stiff and cumbersome. It took immense effort just to raise a hand and press it against his temple, which throbbed as if it might explode. On the other end of the line, the man kept calling his name again and again. The voice sounded familiar. His brain, still nearly at a standstill, managed to produce that one fragment of analysis. Who's this? Shulang's eyes gradually adjusted to the harsh light. He glanced around and realized he was inside his own car. Inside his own car? Why was he in his car? At that moment, his memory was like a computer rebooting, running through a tangle of configuration inputs and connections. The last image he could recall was sitting in the banquet hall, being forced by a female boss to drink a glass of baijiu. Shulang, are you listening? The voice from the phone interrupted his chaotic thoughts. Shulang lifted the phone to his ear and called out, "Fansha?" "It took you so long to answer the phone. And when we finally did, you didn't say a word. What's going on? Why is your voice so hoarse?" "It's nothing. I just drank too much last night." Shulang glanced at his watch. It was 7:15. "What made you call me so early?" "I see you really did drink too much. Did you forget? I have a meeting at Bohai today. My car's in for maintenance. And you said you'd drive over to pick me up so we could go together. I called you to ask what you want for breakfast. I'm making it right now." Shulang's mind, still sluggish, couldn't immediately process the flood of literal meanings in Fansha's words. He forced himself to replay yesterday's events in his head, yet nowhere could he find the memory Fansha was describing. It must be the aftermath of a hangover. Shulang felt a flicker of frustration. "Give me 20 minutes." The image of a man reeking of a hangover was bound to be dreadful. He flipped down the visor, opened the mirror, intending to tidy himself up. "I won't eat breakfast. I just sobered up. I can't." Shulang's hand froze in mid-air. The man in the long, narrow mirror. The phone slipped from his grasp as he leaned in sharply, eyes narrowing at his own reflection. The man in the mirror had disheveled hair, a deathly pale complexion, flushed and swollen lips, and a small cut clearly visible at the corner of his mouth. His fingers jerked, yanking open the collar of his shirt. The man in the mirror looked utterly stunned. A startling scatter of hickeys blazed across his skin. Strange, ambiguous marks stretched from beneath his ear all the way down to his collarbone, scattered and crisscrossed like wild graffiti scrawled across a canvas. On that fair skin, bruised purples and mottled blues intertwined in shocking contrast. As sensation in his peripheral nerves gradually reawakened, Shulang began to feel the pain. His trembling fingertips brushed the darkest mark on his neck. His brows knit tightly, and he hissed through his teeth. It was a bite mark. Looking closely, he could still see the distinct shape of teeth marks, neat in their spacing, perfect in their size. Fuck. Shulang slammed his fist hard against the steering wheel. The furious blare of the horn echoed through the empty parking lot. When Fanshawe arrived, Yu Shulang was sitting in the car with a stern and solemn expression. Fanshawe opened the car door and slid into the passenger seat. Were you that drunk? Threw up and stained your clothes? Fanshawe handed the garments in his hand to Yu Shulang. Here, the turtleneck you asked me to get. Aren't you going to feel hot wearing it now? You got a cigarette? Yu Shulang cut him off. I've run out of mine. Fanshawe frowned slightly, turned, and picked up a bottle of water from the car door pocket. He twisted it open. Your voice has already become hoarse. Don't smoke. Drink some water. Moisten your throat. Cigarette. Yu Shulang finally turned his face toward Fanshawe. I want a cigarette. Yu, what's wrong with you? Fanshawe suddenly leaned closer, his gaze sweeping from the cut on Yu Shulang's lip to the bruises mottling in his neck. After the initial jolt of shock, he paused in thought, then leaned back slowly, drawing out his words. Didn't expect Director Yu's girlfriend to be that wild. Out of the corner of his eye, Fanshawe caught the sight of Yu Shulang's hand, tightening into a hard fist on his knee. The empty cigarette pack was lifted again, his fingers probing inside as if hoping something might appear. But when they met only emptiness, his hand clenched, crushing the pack into a crumpled ball. I think I was molested. Yu Shulang's voice trembled as he spoke. What? Fanshawe's face registered open shock. You were what? Those marks, aren't they from your girlfriend? No. Yu Shulang looked at Fanshawe with a stern expression on his face. I want a cigarette. Fanshawe began searching for cigarettes. He was wearing layers of clothing with too many pockets, and after rummaging through several empty ones, he cursed under his breath in irritation. Finally, he found them. He placed 2 cigarettes between his lips at the same time, struck a match, and lit them one after another. Thin tendrils of smoke curled upward. Fanshawe took one out and placed it between Yu Shulang's lips. What happened? He asked. After 2 or 3 drags of cigarette, Yu Shulang finally spoke. There was a dinner party last night. After it ended, I was waiting for my designated driver in the parking lot. My memories after that are unclear. When I woke up, I'm already like this. You were drugged with that drug again? That single sentence made Yu Shulang recall his own embarrassment from a few months ago. From childhood to adulthood, he had never once allowed anyone to see his disgrace. Even when he was grinding his teeth to powder on the inside, outwardly he carried himself with effortless calm and composure. After stepping into the working world, he moved with even greater ease, never allowing himself to fall into awkward or humiliating situations. And yet, the only 2 disgraces he had suffered in recent days had both been witnessed by Fanshawe, the first time against his will, the second time by his own choice. Why had he called Fanshawe here? He could easily blame it all on the haze of a hungover mind, but deep down, Yu Shulang knew exactly where the line between confusion and clarity had been drawn. Fanshawe, whom he had known only half a year, and who had gone from stranger to friend in an even shorter span of time. He was powerful but not distant, rational yet unexpectedly free-spirited. He was well-mannered but unafraid to tease. He respected boundaries yet sometimes crossed them without hesitation. It had always been difficult for Yu Shulang to let down his guard before anyone, let alone place his trust in them. Yet somehow, against all odds, Fanshawe had managed to make him to do just that. When had that change begun? Yu Shulang had thought about it carefully once. Maybe it started with that sentence. Director Yu ought to put on a bit of an act and make those clueless guys shut up once and for all. Or perhaps it began with that glass of aphrodisiac-laced wine. When he had seen Yu Shulang at his most wretched, his most humiliated, yet he had shown neither disgust nor avoidance, treating him just as he always had. Or maybe it started that night when they had both beaten up Zhu Botian together, and afterward, amid the night breeze, he had leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, Director Yu, tonight let me help you vent your anger a little more. Yu Shulang lifted his gaze toward Fanshawe and replied, Probably not. That kind of drug only induces sexual arousal. Last night I was completely unconscious. When he reached to take the cigarette out, the cigarette butt brushed against the wound on his lip, making him frown slightly in pain. Does it hurt? Fanchou pressed down on Yu Shulang's hand, which was about to bring the cigarette to his lips again, leaned in and gently touched the bleeding cut. You don't. Yu Shulang leaned back a little. Don't move, let me take a look. Fanchou wrapped his arm around his shoulder and pulled him back, his fingers gently brushing over the wound. Does it hurt? A bit. Fanchou's brow twitched slightly, a flicker of regret glinting in his eyes, so faint he himself wasn't even aware of it. This was a bite? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Yu Shulang lowered his lashes, silent for a moment before murmuring, It should be. Fanchou's gaze drifted downward, tracing the mortal kiss marks scattered along the man's neck. And under the clothes, are there more? Yu Shulang took a deep drag on his cigarette, turned his head, and exhaled slowly. Yeah, there are more. Whoever it was, a complete pervert. Definitely a pervert, Fanchou agreed. And the rest? Yu Shulang quickly shook his head. Just a sexual molestation, nothing beyond that. Then who do you think it could be? Have no idea. Has anyone ever shown that kind of interest in you before? Yu Shulang turned his gaze toward Fanchou and gave a stiff smile. Taking a drag of his cigarette, he said, Except for you, always so clinging and annoyingly affectionate, everyone around me is serious, decent, and proper. Fanchou's finger twitched, his expression darkening with irritation. I'm trying to talk to you seriously, and you still have the mood to joke? Yu Shulang flicked the cigarette butt out the narrow gap of the window, then reached for the clothes Fanchou had brought. My head's a mess right now. I've got nothing, no leads at all. Right in front of Fanchou, he suddenly pulled off his clothes, revealing a body covered in red marks. Those marks were shocking. What had been faint and blurred last night was now stark and unmistakable, his body blotched with a trail of red and purple, especially across his chest, where the bruises were swollen and the overlapping hickeys stood out glaringly distinct. Fanshawe clicked his tongue softly, a real, tangible sense of regret rising in him. Next time, need to be gentler, he thought instinctively. However, this repentant man, while feeling guilty, couldn't help but become aroused at the same time. Like a gentleman, Fanshawe turned his gaze away, waiting until Yu Shulang had slipped on the turtleneck before steadying his own thoughts and asking quietly, Do you think this person was a man or a woman? Yu Shulang's moment paused. A face surfaced in his mind, the woman from the banquet last night, the one who had kept pressing him to drink. Warmth spread across his shoulder as a hand rested there. Fanshawe's expression was more solemn than ever before. Shulang, I'll definitely help you track down that pervert. This grudge, you must avenge it. End of chapter 25. Chapter 26. Exposed. Fan the Lunatic. On the streets of the north in October, fallen leaves had already paved the ground. The leaves beneath their feet splintered and broke, their veins snapping with a crisp sound. Amid the elegant rhythm of crocodile leather shoes crossing over each other, every step echoed with the final rustle of life's parading breath. Fanshawe spotted Yu Shulang standing in front of the club. He stood beneath the kaleidoscope neon lights, a cigarette between his fingers, his tall and lean figure half hidden, half revealed in the shifting play of light and shadow. The transitions between the light were not seamless. In those moments of flickering disconnection, he seemed to melt into the darkness, only the faint outline of his figure maintained, along with the curling white smoke rising into the air. Together they deepened the sense of distance and solitude that clung to the man, unspeakable, unreachable, yet carrying an indescribable, irresistible allure. Fanshawe walked forward at an unhurried pace and called out to him. Yu Shulang turned his gaze toward him, nodded faintly, then stubbed out a cigarette and flicked it into the nearby trash can. Sorry for calling you out on such short notice. Yu Shulang's voice was a little hoarse. I remember you said you had a banquet tonight. Guests can be entertained any day, but an invitation from Director Yu can't be declined. Don't stand on ceremony between us. Besides, even if you hadn't asked me out, I would have come looking for you. Fancher lowered his voice slightly. I checked on that female boss who kept forcing you to drink that night. After the banquet ended, she didn't return to her company or go home. I had someone trick a bit of information out of her assistant, but it turns out even she has no idea where her boss went that night. Fancher asked, I'll continue to investigate. If it really turns out to be her, what do you plan to do? Yu Shulang lifted his eyes, deep and cold as a still pond, and said coolly, There is no need to investigate further. It wasn't her. Fancher's fingers gave a slight twitch as he adjusted his expression into one of puzzlement. Why do you say that? Wasn't she the only suspect you could think of? The cold wind whispered through the still night, stirring a few strands of his hair. Yu Shulang's pupils contracted, his tone turning cold and hard. The surveillance cameras in the hotel's restaurant's parking lot were deliberately damaged a day before the incident. If this was a premeditated attack targeting me, then it could have been that female boss. The banquet that night was the first time she had ever met me. There is no way she could have known in advance to go and sabotage the parking lot's cameras a day earlier. Fanshawe frowned slightly. If it wasn't her, then who could it be? Don't tell me you were just unlucky enough to run into someone who acted on a sudden impulse. Yushalang lowered his somber gaze, his hoarse voice carrying a faint edge of hostility. I found the one who drugged me. He turned to glance at the entrance of the club. He's inside. What? Fanshawe's brows froze mid-arch, and he quickly shifted his expression from shock to delight. You really found him? How did you manage that? I drank too much that night and called a designated driver, but before he even arrived, I'd already lost consciousness. Yushulang shook his phone slightly. I got in touch with that designated driver. He told me that when he reached the parking lot, there was only a thin, long-faced man standing in front of my car. That man told him the service wasn't needed anymore and handed him 200 yuan. Yushulang did not notice Fanshawe's hands slowly tightening into fists as he continued. That designated driver happened to know that thin, long-faced man. He had taken one of his orders about a month ago. Apparently, the man had been behaving licentiously with a woman in the car back then. It left a strong impression on the driver. I paid him a little money and got the man's license plate number. A sharp gleam flashed in Yushulang's eyes, his voice laced with an icy undertone. Following that lead, I traced the plate number and found the thin, long-faced man. He's inside the club right now. He's inside the club right now? Fanshawe's hand slipped into his pocket, brushing against the matchbox hidden there. He remembered that day when Shi Liuwam had mentioned it was one of his friends who had drugged Yushulang. Fanshawe had even warned him then to tell his friend to keep his mouth shut. He hadn't expected them to be this careless, leaving such an obvious trail for Yushulang to follow so quickly. What do you plan to do now? Fanshawe asked Yushulang. The man's back slowly straightened, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. His face was devoid of expression as he uttered word by word, Meet him. Then let's go. Fanshawe took the lead, stepping into the club, the hem of his long wool coat cutting a graceful arc through the air as he turned. Hey! Yushulang reached out, catching Fanshawe's arm. That man's got a bit of influence. You might get dragged into trouble because of this. I'd understand if you don't want to go in with me. The tall man turned around again. The emotion in his eyes was deep and steady, his lips curling into a faint smile. Don't talk nonsense. I wasn't raised to be scared of anything. Come on, he said, tugging Yushulang forward. Which private room? The corridor of the club stretched long and dim. As they walked, Fanshawe took out his phone and said casually, I was in a bit of a hurry on the way here. Didn't even tell my assistant I'm skipping tonight's banquet. His long fingers tapped across the keyboard a few times. He sent out a message. The screen went dark, and he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then Fanshawe gripped the golden door handle, glanced at Yushulang, and his face, calm as still water, pulled open the heavy door. A pungent, choking scent surged out to meet them. Inside, the music blared at an ear-splitting volume. Bodies twisted in rhythm like zombies writhing at the end of the world, soulless figures moving without life, without meaning everywhere. Even as the door opened, no one inside the private room noticed the two unfamiliar faces that had just stepped in. In the center of the private room, on the large sofa, sat a man with a thin, elongated face. Around him clustered two or three women with plunging necklines and exposed breasts. Beside them lounged several fashionably dressed men, each similarly surrounded by scantily clad women or men. Fancho waded through the frenzied swarm of dancing demons and stopped before the giant LED screen. His fingers curled around a few connection cables, then yanked hard. Stopped, silenced, stunned. It was as if someone had pressed the pause button. The noise cut off mid-beat. The twisting bodies froze in their distorted poses, and the hands resting on the high, soft mounts forgot how to move. Everyone stared blankly at Fanchao. Who the fuck are you? Got a death wish? Someone finally snapped out of it, leaping up from the sofa. At that moment, Yu Shulang strolled in through the doorway, his pace unhurried. One hand rested casually in his pocket, while the other tapped rhythmically against his thigh. His voice was slow and even. Third young master by? I've got something to discuss with you. Clear the room. Sure. The thin, long-faced man sitting in the center visibly startled the instant he saw Yu Shulang. The guilt flickering in his eyes was impossible to miss. His eyes shifted slowly, landing next on Fanxiao. The spinning, multicolored lights swept across Fanxiao's white cashmere coat, the glow cutting sharp against the pale fabric, making him appear at once austere and chillingly spectral. His eyes suddenly widened, and his long, narrow face tightened as his voice rose in pitch. You are. How come you're with him? The matchbox in Fancher's pocket was suddenly crushed flat in his palm. End of chapter 26.